आज के मुसलमान का मसला तो नहीं है, मगर कई ऐसी चीज़ें और तस्वुरात हैं जो इस्लाम के मुनाफी हैं, इसकी तरफ आखिरकार ले ही जाती हैं, जिसके लवाजमात पर बात करने के लिए आज हमने मोहतरम अदनान राशिद साहब को दावत दी है। अदनान राशिद साहब का तअल्लुक यूथ ऑफ उम्मा से है। आप मशहूर मुसन्निफ, शायर, मौरख और हिटन यूनिवर्सिटी लंदन में लेक्चरर और सीनियर रिसर्चर के फ़राइज़ सरअंजाम दे रहे हैं। दीन इस्लाम से आपको खुसूसी लगाव है। आपने बहुत से बैनुल-अक़वामी सतह के इदारों में मुख्तलिफ मौज़ूआत पर लेक्चर दिए हैं। आप टीवी और रेडियो से भी मुंसलिक रहे हैं। अब मैं बिला किसी ताख़ीर के मोहतरम अदनान राशिद साहब को दावत देती हूँ कि वो तशरीफ़ लाएँ और ज़ेर बहस मौजू से हमें आगाही दें।
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala khatimil anbiya wa sayyidil mursaleen. A'udhu billahi as-sami'il 'alim minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wa ma arsalnaka illa rahmatan lil alamin. Respected brothers and sisters, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for inviting me to deliver this very important lecture. I will be talking in the English language because that's the language I feel most comfortable with, although I may drop a few sentences, a few verses in the Urdu poetry here and there. So please bear with me. Can everyone understand English here? Everyone? Yes? So everyone feels comfortable with English. Because of the topic is answering atheism. And atheism is conveyed mostly in the world in the English language. That's why I have chosen to deliver this particular lecture in the English language. I can speak in Urdu as well. Urdu is my mother tongue and I'm very comfortable with it. But I think due to the terminologies I will be using in the lecture, it is best to be consistent with those terminologies and speak in the English language. But I will begin my lecture with a very powerful poetical expression by none other than famous Allama Iqbal. He titled this particular poetical expression Afrangzada, which actually means westernized. So he had this to say, तेरा वजूद सरापा तजल्ली अफरंग, तेरा वजूद सरापा तजल्ली अफरंग कि तू वहां के इमारत घरों की है तामीर, मगर ये तय करे खाकी खुदी से है खाली, फकत नयाम है तू जर निगाह बेशमशीर, तेरी निगाह में साबित नहीं खुदा का वजूद, मेरी निगाह में साबित नहीं वजूद तेरा, वजूद क्या है फकत जोहरे खुदी की नमूद, कर अपनी फिक्र के जोहर है बेनमूद तेरा. Iqbal. So what is Iqbal saying here? Iqbal was addressing a problem that he had found in his day and age. He is talking to people who have become westernized in the mind. They have been mentally colonized. As we all know from our history, this region was colonized by the British. The British Raj was firmly established in the 19th century, especially after the Indian Mutiny or the War of Independence, depending on how you want to see it. In 1857, the natives, they rose against the British Raj, and this is another lecture in itself. I'm not going to go into the details. After that, the British Empire was firmly established, and it was declared an empire, and Queen Victoria was declared an empress. The process had begun a century earlier. In 1757, exactly a century before the Indian Mutiny, the British won a battle called the Battle of Plassey against one of the Nawabs of Bengal, and there began the slow colonization of the Indian subcontinent. First, the British took over Bihar, Bengal, and Orissa, these three provinces, the richest provinces in the Mughal Empire. And the Mughals had already been declining politically. And with political decline came the economic decline and military decline and moral decline, you name it. And all the external and internal powers started to attack the Muslim hub of India called Delhi. Delhi represented the Muslim civilization in the Indian subcontinent. This is where your best poets, best authors, best philosophers, best theologians, best Jewish were born, in the city of Delhi. For almost 6 centuries, this city was the hub of Muslim civilization in the Indian subcontinent. This is where the Delhi Sultanate was established. This is where the followers or the successors of Sultan Shahabuddin Ghori established a power hub. This is where the Mongol invasions of India were repelled. Nowadays, if you watch Indian news channels and you see a lot of rhetoric against Islam and Muslims, you see a lot of hatred being pumped against Islamic figures in the Indian mainstream media, which is very much dominated by the ruling political party. And recently there were many attacks on personalities like Aurangzeb Alamgir and Tipu Sultan, for example. And there is reason for that. The Hindutva movement in India, backed by BJP, is adamant at removing Islam from Indian history, which is impossible. It cannot be done. Islam is an integral part of the Indian landscape. It cannot be removed. And they are in vain attempting to remove it. And one of the tactics is to distort the history of this region. If we forget about all other contributions of the Muslims made to the Indian civilization, there is one particular contribution, there's one particular favor the Muslims did to the Indian subcontinent that can never be forgotten. That was stopping the Mongol invasions. Mongols were invading India for over a century. For over a century. They had devastated land starting from China all the way up to Syria. It is estimated that almost 10 million people were killed by the Mongols within that region. And in fact, Delhi Sultanate was made by the Mongols because of the migration. The region today known as Transaxonia or Central Asia, or in the Arabic language, Mawara al-Nahar, was a hub of Muslim civilization. A lot of scholars, poets, theologians had to migrate to India to seek refuge because of Mongol invasions. And Mongols were not stopping. So they came all the way to India. They invaded places like Lahore. Lahore was attacked by the Mongols a number of times. Unfortunately, not many youngsters are aware of this history. It is very important for us to know this history so that we can better understand what's happening today, globally. So Mongols invaded India. They invaded Delhi. They invaded Lahore. They were close to Multan. And who was stopping them? Who was fighting against them? The Delhi Sultanate. In fact, some of the kings, they lost their sons. One of them was a very powerful king called Sultan Ghiyasuddin Balban, who governed for nearly 20 years. He lost his son, Prince Muhammad, in a battle. And in that very battle, Amir Khusro, you know Amir Khusro? Have you heard of it? Right? A lot of poetry in the Hindu language is attributed to him. You know, ये बहुत सारी गज़लें जो आजकल हमारे जो सिंगर्स हैं और फनकार उन्होंने गाई हैं अमीर खुसरो की. Amir Khusro was present in that very battle himself. He was captured by the Mongols, and in his Persian poetry, he actually describes the Mongols. So the point I'm making is that this one favor, the Muslims or the Muslim civilization or the Muslims who had become Indianized, they did to India, cannot be forgotten. Perhaps India would have had a different history today if the Mongols were allowed to come in, but they were stopped by the Delhi Sultanate. So this was the civilization of Islam in a nutshell and its contribution. And there's a lot I can say about this, and this is another lecture for another day. So returning to my topic, answering atheism. Why am I talking about atheism today? So I started with the British Raj. In the 18th century, British merchants who had hired private armies to protect their own interests, their economic interests, had suddenly woken up to the reality of the fact that they have become masters of 3 richest provinces of the Mughal Empire. They couldn't believe it. Not in their wildest dreams could they imagine that one day they will become the masters of the Indian subcontinent. They never planned it, they never intended it, they never dreamed about it. So within a short span of time, they were masters of 3 provinces. And then they saw the opportunity to expand, and this expansion happened. One after another, many provinces were taken. Finally, the last meaningful resistance was removed, and that was in the form of the state of Mysore in the south. Sultan Tipu, or Tipu Sultan, was killed in 1799. 4th of May, 1799, Seringapatam was annexed, and Tipu Sultan was killed in battle. And Iqbal paid lavish tributes to Tipu Sultan. By the way, scholars of Iqbaliyat, or people who study Iqbal, rahmatullah, they believe that the peak of Iqbal, in other words, Iqbal's peak in poetry is his Javed Nama, his Persian collection, which unfortunately the Pakistanis are mainly or mostly unaware of, because we don't speak the Persian language, we don't understand it. That generation that spoke the Persian language died in the 80s, in the 70s. And in the 70s, Persian language was removed from the curriculum, and a phrase was made famous. In Makula, Pakistan mein bada mashhoor kiya gaya tha, Pado Farsi. Who knows it? Who knows it? Becho tero. Right. You see, have you noticed that none of the youngsters are aware of this? They wouldn't know about this. Ek makula Pakistan mein mashhoor kiya gaya tha, Pado Farsi becho tel. Right? In other words, if you study Persian, you have no future. And this was the dilemma for us. 6 centuries of civilization was taken away from us in one strike. And I'll come to that in due course very quickly. So I was talking about Tipu Sultan. So that you can understand the political background of the rise of atheism we face today in places like Pakistan and other Muslim countries where colonization had taken place. So until then, until the British had defeated Tipu Sultan, they did not feel militarily, economically, technologically superior to the local Muslim powers. And some of the Western thinkers and authors have acknowledged this in their books. There is an author called William Dalrymple who has read his books or looked at his books. Only one person. Okay, thank you. William Dalrymple has written a number of books on Indian history. 2 in particular very important books, and I strongly recommend these books. One is White Mughals. One is titled The White Mughals. The other one is The Last Mughal. It is a biography of Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal emperor, and it's a very powerful book. I recommend it strongly, and it's written in a very objective fashion. He's a very good author, not because he favors us in any way, rather he is an objective historian who describes history as he sees it, right? So he was of the view, and in his book, The White Mughals, he argues that British officers or British administrators in India in the 18th century actually felt inferior in front of the Mughal civilization. They had become Mughalized. They started to wear Mughal clothes. They started to smoke hookah. They started to lean on couches. They felt inferior facing the Mughal civilization in India. They started to adopt Urdu language or even Persian language. They started to write poetry in the Persian and the Urdu language because they felt politically, economically, culturally inferior to the dominant power in India at the time. Even though it was in a sharp decline, the Mughal Empire was already declined, or it had declined already. Some of the British administrators felt inferior. In fact, Tipu Sultan was still a standing power who had excelled in the fields of military technology, and Pakistan is a garrison state, just like the state of Mysore. Pakistan is in a continuous state of conflict with its neighbors, in particular India. And Pakistan, the military institutions of Pakistan can learn a lot from the history of Tipu Sultan. I believe we haven't yet studied him properly. We know his name. We know about his martyrdom on the 4th of May 1799, but we don't know the man and his achievements. And this is another lecture in itself, so I'm not going to go into that. So until he was alive, the British felt inferior. They actually considered him an equal. But when he was killed and his library plundered, his state plundered, his treasure taken all the way to Britain and distributed among the looters, then the British started to feel a superiority complex. They started to have this superiority complex, that we are actually militarily superior. We are not only militarily superior, we are economically superior. Therefore, we are culturally superior. And then came the racial sense of superiority. We are racially superior. So then began racism, colonial racism. When the Indians, the natives, were called blackies, they were looked down upon. They were looked as savages. The new generation that came to power, people who were actually reading John Stuart Mill, a British philosopher. This was a new generation. They hadn't seen the Mughal Empire or the Mughal civilization. This was a new generation that came to power in the early 19th century. And when they came to serve in India, they had this racial sense of superiority, which was backed by military superiority that came with economic superiority. And then they started to look down upon natives and their religions. Then systematically Christianity was promoted by missionaries. Missionaries were sent in, and Christian missionaries were backed by the might of the British Raj. And they started to preach openly to the Indians, who were Hindus and Muslims mainly. And Muslims, of course, there was very little success as far as the missionaries were concerned, and many debates took place. In 1854, in Agra, there were debates happening between Christian missionaries and Muslim scholars. And this created a tension between the two civilizations, and it resulted in the War of Independence, 1857. A lot of people think that the War of Independence happened because of this issue of cartridges. The British had invented these new cartridges, and one had to chew these cartridges to use them in the matchlocks. And these cartridges were made of, or in the manufacture, they used cow fat, which was, cows are sacred for the Hindus, and pigs are haram for the Muslims. So cow and pig fat was used to make these cartridges, and the Muslims and the Hindus, they thought that the British are now deliberately trying to impose their religion on the native forces. So they rebelled, and lo and behold, India was in rebellion, which is another history in itself. How did the British Raj actually impose its own civilization on the natives? It became a civilizing exercise. As far as the natives were concerned, They were savages. They were uncivilized, unlike the British. So they had to be civilized. And there were two ways of doing it. One way was to get them to adopt the civilized religion, which was Christianity at the time, the British Raj. And the other way was to introduce your own education system and remove any traces of previous civilizations. So in 1834, Persian language was finally abolished. And English language was brought in slowly as the language of administration. So imagine for 6 centuries, from the year 1200 to 1834, the Persian language was the state language. It was the language of the literati. It was the language of the educated class. It was the language used in poetry, in writing state documents, in state correspondence, even the language of the learned, the educated people, Persian. It was suddenly abolished by the British, 1834. So, of course, there was a reaction. There was a reaction from the ulama, from the scholars, and even Hindus who had adopted the Persian language, who had become increasingly Persianized. They had a problem with this. But within a generation, it was forgotten. And by the year 1860, the new generation had already become anglicized. And because the British became the masters, the political masters, more so after the War of Independence in 1857, every child who went through their education system was mentally colonized, not only physically colonized. That child, a native Indian child, whether Hindu or Muslim, was mentally colonized. जिसको हम उर्दू में मरूब कहते हैं. हर बच्चा जो उस एजुकेशन सिस्टम से गुजरा वो मरूब हो गया. And then we had some intellectuals who started to adopt the British way of life, the British way of thinking, and they became Afrangzada, which is what Iqbal was talking about. Tera wujud sarapa tajalli afrang ke tu wahan ke imarat garo ki hai ta'mir. Right? This is exactly Iqbal was talking about. And Iqbal had traveled to the West. He had studied in Germany, in Heidelberg. As we know, he did his PhD in Heidelberg in Persian metaphysics. And then he traveled to Britain, advised by his teacher, Professor Thomas Walker Arnold, who was also a philosopher, who had advised Iqbal to take a degree from Cambridge in law. Iqbal did that. And when he came to the West, that's when he realized the value of Islam and Islamic civilization. That's when Iqbal's poetry changed forever. He was not one of those people who was completely mesmerized by the pomp and the glitter or the military or the technological might of the West. What he saw was a kind of moral decline in the West. West was heading towards atheism. It had abandoned Christianity for atheism. A lot of Western intellectuals were becoming atheists. And this was not because atheism was more intellectually satisfying or stimulating. It was because a lot of Western scholars had realized that Christianity doesn't make sense to them. And this process had begun in the 18th century. To understand an idea, you must understand its history, its background. Its background, you must understand it. So where does this phenomenon today called atheism come from? Where does it come from? I believe the foundations were laid in the 18th century Europe. What we know today as commonly the European Enlightenment, the Enlightenment period. Who knows about it? Anyone? The Enlightenment period. Sorry? I'd say I can't hear you. मुझे आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही. Renaissance is Renaissance is not the Enlightenment period. Renaissance began in the 15th century. Well, people like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and others like Copernicus and Galileo, these are the people who are writing in the European mainland, Western Europe mainly, Italy, France, Britain, Germany. This is where the Renaissance took place, what we call Nishat-e Saniya, right? The revival of the European civilization. Europeans suddenly woke up to a civilization that was dead for them. But amazingly, it happened through the bridge of Islamic civilization. There was no way for the Europeans, or there was no prospect for the Europeans to wake up to a civilization they had lost without the civilization of Islam. It were the Muslims who had in Europe, I mean, the ones in Spain, in Al-Andalus, and in Sicily, they are the ones who had resurrected the works of Aristotle and Plato and other Greek philosophers, and then wrote extensive commentaries in the Arabic language on these philosophers and produced original works. These original works were later on translated into the Latin language for the Europeans, and then the Europeans adopted these works, and it was in the Renaissance period when the Europeans had suddenly woken up to this civilization called the ancient Greek or classical civilization, and that's why this period is known as the Renaissance. But I am talking about the Enlightenment. Renaissance period was not particularly atheistic. No. Atheism as an ideology, as a system of thinking was not promoted during the Renaissance. It happened in the 18th century, between the year 1700 to 1800. This is the period. In this century were born people like the French philosopher Voltaire, David Hume, the British philosopher. We had people like Immanuel Kant, who was born in Germany. So these are the masterminds of modern atheism. These are the people who wanted to break away from religion. And what religion were they trying to break away from? They were breaking away from church oppression. They found the church to be highly oppressive. Are you getting bored? Neend to nahi aa rahi? Are you sure? Yes. Yeah, English zuban bahut mushkil hai. Do you all understand what I'm talking about? Yes. Are you sure? Yes. Okay, I'll continue. And a lot more interesting stuff is coming in due course, inshallah. Right? So this is the Muqaddama, the beginning, the introduction of the lecture. Okay? The background history of atheism, where it came from and how it reached you and why it has become fashion today. Why it has become fashion today. We'll talk about that in due course. So, Hume, Voltaire, and Kant. Hume was an extreme empiricist. He is one of the authors who had written on epistemology, the theory of knowledge, how you get to know the truth. And his view was that you can never know anything for certain. You can never be certain about anything. But if you think about this very statement, which is what the Western civilization today is based upon, what we call extreme skepticism. Extreme skepticism. This is what Western civilization today is based upon, this very idea. Hume, in my view, is the founding father of the current Western philosophical thought. And this is no exaggeration. Hume is the founding father of current Western philosophical and scientific thought. He is the founding father. And it is this statement that is the core of Hume's thinking. You can never be certain about anything. But if you think about this very statement in itself, this statement is problematic. Who wants to help me? How? G. Thank you. This statement in itself is paradoxical. It's contradictory. Hume said you can never be certain about anything. In other words, we cannot be certain about what Hume is saying. Right? So, as soon as this founding principle of the Western civilization as we know it today, and I don't want to be crude, there are many great things about Western civilization. There are many beautiful things about Western civilization. There are huge achievements of Western civilization which we must cherish and praise. We are a people of justice. We are not a bunch of bigots and a bunch of haters, for that matter, to use a crude word, that we will reject any good deed done by anyone. No, just because of certain negative thought processes. I believe Western civilization has great achievements and we can learn a lot from them. But it is not the end. When it comes to morality and ethics, there is nothing the West can offer to the Muslim civilization. Nothing. Nothing. And I'm very, very clear on that, as we will see in due course. So Hume was an open atheist. Kant, a German philosopher, Immanuel Kant, was not an open atheist. It is thought that he was actually a deist who believed in some kind of supreme entity who made this universe. But he was an extreme skeptic as well. Voltaire was also an anti-religion activist, but was not an atheist. And the French Revolution was the peak of this thought. This thought translated into eventually the French Revolution. Francisi Inqilab, one of the bloodiest revolutions in human history. And what was the revolution about? It was about getting rid of the ancient regime, the old order, which was based upon monarchical as well as the religious system. So it was designed to abolish religion. It was designed to abolish religion. And there is no doubt that there was a group called the Illuminati. Now, you may be thinking this guy is a conspiracy theorist, right? Now, he was perfectly fine so far, thus far. Now he's going into a territory where he is going to sound controversial. No, I'm not. I'm not going to present any conspiracy theories in front of you. I am going to state facts. And facts are based upon evidence, right? Yes? French Revolution was directly led by a coalition of atheists and deists. And the sole purpose of this revolution was to abolish religion and the monarchical system and bring about a system that can facilitate atheism and deism. And some of the European history was used as an example because Europe was not the land of freedom of speech. It wasn't. In fact, Europe was civilized as we see civilization very recently. Did you know, as late as the 18th century, सन 1780 तक, जब टीपू सुल्तान जिंदा थे, जब शाह आलम सानी मुगल शहंशाह दिल्ली में, वो उनकी हैसियत तो एक पपेट की थी. He had no real power. He was alive. और बड़े बड़े स्कॉलर्स इंडिया में उस वक्त जिंदा थे. सन 1780 तक यूरोप में औरतों को जिंदा जलाया जाता था. Women were being burnt alive for being witches. Witch hunting? Have you studied the history of witch hunting? I mean, this is an open invitation. Hundreds of thousands of women, hundreds of thousands, लाखों औरतें, in particular औरतें, were burnt alive at stake in public squares. इस्लामाबाद में सबसे मशहूर स्क्वायर कौन सा है यहाँ पर? कौन सा? बीच चौक कौन सा वाला है? I don't know where it is. ये 0 पॉइंट वाला? कौन सा? फैजाबाद? कौन सा? चले जो भी है, you all know it, right? Imagine on a public square, and I don't want you to imagine, 10 women are being burnt alive, and there is a spectacle. There is a spectacle. Everyone's watching. और वहां पर लोग जो है वो चीजें बेच रहे हैं. दाल सेमियां बेची जाती हैं आपके क्रिकेट मैचेस में, और ये जहां पर बहुत सारा क्राउड होता है वहां पर ये जो स्वीट्स बेचने वाले और ये चीज लोग भी आ जाते हैं, right? This is how it was. And from the year 1450 to 1750, Within these 3 centuries, hundreds of thousands of women were being burnt alive for being apparently or allegedly witches. They were doing magic and they were accused of being witches, and they had a process. This is another topic in itself. I'm not going to go into it. So I'm giving you pointers, parameters. You can go and research these topics in your own time. So some of these European philosophers, and then heretics were being burnt alive. Who was a heretic? Who was a heretic? Heretic was someone who disagreed with the mainstream church opinions. Whether you were a Protestant or a Catholic, Catholics were burning Protestants, Protestants were burning Catholics. And this is happening during the Enlightenment period, which is known as the Enlightenment period in the European history, जिसको हम उर्दू में जब उसका तर्जुमा करेंगे तो रोशन ख्याली का दौर, रोशन ख्याली का दौर, the Enlightenment. इस दौरान हजारों लोग जिंदा जलाए जा रहे थे by the church, by the Christian church, the established church, backed by the state, and this was happening all over Europe. So बहुत सारे philosophers, they couldn't express their opinions openly. They disagreed with the Christian doctrine because they studied Christianity thoroughly. One of them was Isaac Newton. Who knows Isaac Newton? Isaac Newton. This is, I believe, science is the main subject here in this university, right? Yes? Right, so you should know Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton was one of those people who was writing his theology in secret. He couldn't write openly. There were others who wrote openly and they were attacked. Some of them were nearly burnt alive at stake. You know Galileo, right? उसका कसूर क्या था? उसका क्राइम क्या था गैलीलियो का? क्या कसूर था उसका? उसने क्या बोल दिया चर्च के अगेंस्ट? क्या कह दिया उसने? उसकी क्या थ्योरी थी? Sun? Right. No. It was the other way around. Yes. So his view was that the solar system is heliocentric, not geocentric. The church view for centuries until the time of Galileo was that the solar system or the universe is geocentric. हर चीज जो जमीन के गिर्द घूमती है. लेकिन Galileo, obviously being an astronomer, a scientist, he observed, and his observations led him to believe. And by the way, he took his theories from Copernicus, and Copernicus was reading people like Ibn Nafis and other Muslim philosophers before him, right? So his theory was that the solar system is heliocentric. Actually, the sun is in the middle, and other planets are going around the sun. Us pe uski jaan phas gayi. He was in trouble, and he was put through inquisition. Yani he was asked to retract or you will die. So he had to suppress his opinions. This was the mahol in Europe at the time. A lot of the philosophers had already apostatized from Christianity. They had left Christianity because of a number of reasons. Firstly, the Trinity didn't make sense. So there were 3 reactions in Europe to Christian dogma, or the way Christianity was practiced within the European civilization. There were 3 main reactions. I'm cutting it short. And if you want to go into the details, some of the details are shared. There are a few books I can recommend during the Q&A, right? One reaction was outright apostasy. I don't believe in this. This is all bakwas. This was one reaction, right? Christianity is false, therefore no religion can be right. Islam was not an option for the Europeans. And whatever Islam was known to the Europeans, it was known in a distorted form. It was already distorted. The picture was, इस्लाम की तस्वीर मस्क करके जो है वो यूरोपियंस को दिखाई गई थी. जो ऑथर्स थे जो लिख रहे थे इस्लाम के ऊपर, उन्होंने इस्लाम की तस्वीर ऐसी दिखाई यूरोपियंस को, थिंकर्स को, कि वो लोग इस्लाम को कबूल नहीं कर सके. रसूलुल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के ऊपर बायोग्राफीज लिखी गई, and the title would be The Nature of Imposture. The Nature of Imposture, a biography of Mehmet. You know, they used to spell Muhammad like Mehmet, Mehmet. It was like a Turkish pronunciation, because the Turks, the Ottomans, were the biggest threat to the Europeans, so they thought everything Islamic is Ottoman. Right? So, the picture of Islam was distorted. Islam cannot be an option. Christianity is false, then there is no religion. Sorry. Those who could not reject the idea of a supreme being, a supreme entity, a creator, became deists. Deism is a position that there is a creator, there is an entity who created the universe, but this entity is like an absentee landlord. He doesn't take an active part in the running of the universe. He just created it and he left it to run by itself. Then came the third and the most extreme reaction to the European situation, which gave rise to the notion of secularism. And liberalism came from secularism. आजकल बहुत सारे लोग कहते हैं ना मैं लिबरल हूं, right? कहते हैं यहाँ पर पाकिस्तान में कहते हैं ना मैं लिबरल हूं, right? Have you heard this before? हम लिबरल मुस्लिम हैं. इस तरह ये उसी तरह है कि हम मुशरिक मुसलमान हैं, right? और मैं काला गोरा हूं. Have you understood? Does it make sense? मैं काला गोरा हूं. इसकी वजह ये नहीं है कि लिबरलिज्म इज बैड, नहीं. हमारी जो कंसेप्शन है लिबरलिज्म इज समथिंग डिफरेंट टू व्हाट द यूरोपियंस थिंक. European conception of liberalism, what is it? If you want to be consistent, if you want to wear a badge, अगर आपने अपने ऊपर बैज एक लगाना ही है, तो understand the badge, know what the badge stands for. To give you one crude example, would you ever wear a badge saying rapist? Rapist. कभी आप फखर से कहेंगे I'm a rapist? आउज़ु बिल्लाह. कहेंगे आप? या कभी आप ये बैज वेयर करेंगे murderer? नहीं. उसकी वजह क्या है? उसकी वजह क्या है कि you know exactly what a rapist and a murderer means, right? Yes? लेकिन you don't know what a liberal means. In the Europe, where the term came from. The term came from Europe. Liberalism and being a liberal is a European concept. What does it actually constitute? जिन लोगों ने liberalism के ऊपर लिखा है, जो philosophers liberalism के जो founding fathers हैं, people like John Stuart Mill, David Hume, for example, who is cited very often by liberals, or Thomas Paine, right? Read their writings. And Europeans are living by liberalism. They are very consistent. They know what liberalism means. It means an individual has freedom so long as it doesn't impinge upon another's freedom. Let me explain. And I want to be crude about this so that you understand what being a liberal actually means. There's no such thing as Islamic liberalism. It doesn't exist. Islam is Islam. Liberalism is liberalism. So what does liberalism lead to? I'll give you a few examples. Who has been to Holland here? Who has been to Holland? Dutchland. Who has been to Holland? Visa nahi milta hoga. Right? Sometimes this is another form of racism on the part of the Europeans. You are savages. Don't get me wrong. Okay, this is the reality. This is how it is. You don't deserve to come to our countries. When you apply for visas, you are filtered. Only the ones with money, with a lot of properties, plazas, businesses, they get through because they're going to go and spend money. But those who don't have these things to show, you will not get the visa because you will not go and spend money, you will take money. Right? This is how it is. Holland is a country right next to Britain. Actually, it's across the channel. It's very close. Half an hour flight. From London to Amsterdam, I don't think it's more than an hour flight. I haven't flown into Amsterdam. I've been to Holland, but I haven't flown in. I drove from Sweden. There is a place in Holland, in Amsterdam. It is a market. Are you listening? Are you listening to me? Liberalism manifests. Liberalism being consistent with your values. This is how it looks. There's a market in Holland. And in this market, you see living women, not statues, living women standing in cases. There are glass cases. There are living women standing there with the prices on the glass. And people are walking past. Right? Etwar Bazaar gaya na? तो वहां पर आपके साइड्स पे स्टॉल्स लगे होते हैं, बीच में से आप गुजरते हैं पैसेज में से, राइट? और इस तरफ भी सब्जी वाला होगा, कोई कपड़ों वाला होगा, कोई देयर आर डिफरेंट स्टॉल्स. दिस प्लेस इज स्पेसिफिकली फॉर women. They are selling themselves because liberalism allows that. They are selling their bodies and their souls for a price. And because they're individuals, they have this freedom to do so. Because they're not impinging upon someone else's right, they are actually fulfilling their desires as they deem fit. Because they're not harming, they are not directly harming another individual. So anyone who is interested can pay the price and be with them. And there are living women standing in cases, in glass cases. This is liberalism. Now, those who call themselves Muslim liberals or liberals at all, ask them to substantiate this or support this. Do you stand by this? Anyone?
No.
Anyone? So, जब कोई liberal अपने आप को कहे, उसको कहे भाई अगर liberal हो तो फिर liberal हो, right? आधा तीतर आधा बटेर, ये क्या बात हुई? आधा मुसलमान आधा liberal, right? This doesn't make sense. So, I think our conception of liberalism is being open-minded, being tolerant, being generous. This is fine. This is Islam. This is not liberalism. This is fine. अगर आपका मतलब liberal से ये है कि आप liberals हैं और आप ये values, you uphold these values, there's nothing wrong with that. That is very nice. That is, this is something that needs to be cherished. Lekin if you wear a badge, at least study it. At least do research on it. Because it means a lot of things. It leads to many conclusions. It leads to a lifestyle. It leads to a philosophy that you cannot possibly sustain. Now, porn industry, pornography. You know what pornography is, right? Thankfully, it's banned in Pakistan. Lekin Pakistanis, mashallah, they always find ways around. They are always ahead of. So, where is it made? Most of it कहाँ प्रोड्यूस हो रही है? कहाँ हो रहा है? इंडिया में भी हो रहा है, right? Because वो अभी तक colonized है. They have adopted that civilization wholeheartedly. They don't know what they're doing. They're confused, right? Right? It is being produced on a massive scale. It is a multi-billion dollars industry. And if you studied academic journals, which I have had the privilege of, there is one particular scholar I strongly recommend to study on the effects of pornography on the viewers and the indulgent persons, right? This scholar is called, her name is Diana E. Russell. Diana जिसको कहते हैं पाकिस्तान में, Diana E. right? Diana E. Russell, her name is. She has written articles on this issue, right? This is a product of liberalism. There is nothing wrong with people indulging in porn or pornography, having acknowledged clearly that it has a very bad effect on the society. But in liberalism, individual freedom is given precedence over social well-being. This is the underlying philosophy. Societies come after individuals. Individuals are more important. They have the right to exercise their desires, right? And if it has a bad impact on the society, then be it. Guns laws in America. Guns laws. Even though there are mass shootings taking place in American universities and institutions, एक बच्चा guns उठा के एक स्कूल में जाता है और स्प्रे कर देता है पूरे स्कूल को. And these weapons are deadly weapons. And he might or she might end up killing 100 students easily, right? Or there was this massacre, this crazy guy from a hotel, he was shooting at a concert, a densely populated concert. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yes.
कौन से शहर में हुआ था ये? जी? Dallas में हुआ था? Was it Dallas? He was from a hotel window, he was shooting down on thousands of people. Why are they not banning guns? Individualism, liberalism. It is an individual right to own a gun. Now, an individual may lose his mind and go and kill hundreds of people. No, that's another matter. But individual right takes precedence over social well-being. So pornography is allowed on those bases, even though there are direct links between rape and pornography in the West. Diana E. Russell, her research found that in 56% of rape cases, rapists replicated the behavior they had come across in porn videos. So this has a social impact. This is why, you see, we don't need liberalism. Islam, which gives precedence to society over individual. Islam prevents the disease from occurring. This is why porn is not allowed in Islam. Period. It affects the society badly. Women cannot sell themselves in the cases because they might have the right to do so, but this has a bad impact on the society. Therefore, it is not allowed. And the list can go on and on and on. Coming back to the issue of atheism. So liberalism is an offshoot of secularism, secular thought. Secularism came about as a reaction to what was happening in Europe, the church history, church oppression. People were not allowed to express their opinions openly. So some of these scholars, these philosophers who had apostatized from Christianity, rebelled and rejected the idea of Christianity, and it ended in three reactions. One was deism, another one was atheism, and another one was Unitarianism, where some of the scholars had rejected the doctrine of the Trinity, which is the core doctrine of mainstream Christianity. They rejected it and they adopted the idea of Unitarianism. And then, lo and behold, in the 19th century, a lot of the philosophers followed suit, and they also became atheists because they did not believe in Christianity. So in the name of rationalism, they started to come up with atheistic ideas. And then this was put through the education system, and atheism was used as a force to promote racial superiority as well. In fact, Darwin's theory, Charles Darwin, who presented his theory in 1859 in his book, Origin of Species, in this book he presented a new theory that species evolved from primates, but again, this is another topic in itself. And that theory was used by the British Raj to the maximum, and British administrators started to think that they are racially superior, they are more evolved than other human races. So non-white human races are actually still in the process of evolving. They haven't fully yet evolved. And this was taken from another of Darwin's book called The Descent of Man, in which Darwin clearly states that the Caucasian races, the white races, are or appear to be more evolved than non-white races. So a lot of this was used to promote atheism, and in the 20th century, through the education system, Western education system, which was left behind by the colonial powers, atheism is being promoted now on the mainstream Western media outlets deliberately. Now, I believe powers that are governing Western governments, Western governments are also being governed by some powers that are unknown to the masses, right? Western governments are influenced. They're not independent. Donald Trump is not the president of America. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Donald Trump is not the president. Do you think Donald Trump is the brain behind America? Do you actually think that? No. Hello? I don't even think he was the brain behind his own business. He wasn't. I don't think he was running his business. It's impossible for him to succeed that much if he was running behind. So it is not him. It wasn't Obama. It wasn't Tony Blair or David Cameron or Theresa May. These are not the people who are running the government. It is the policymakers. The policymakers are mainly bankers and media pundits, media bosses, people like Rupert Murdoch and these guys. These are the people who are actually actively promoting atheism. They're the ones who give platforms to people like Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, and Dennett, right? These are the guys who are making them look like the intellectual giants of the world today. But if you think about their thinking, you'll come to realize that they need help. They need psychological help. Who knows Richard Dawkins here? Anyone? Richard Dawkins. What is the most famous book he has written? The God Delusion. Right. Richard Dawkins is a man who doesn't believe in morality. He may have personal morality, but because he wants to be a consistent atheist, because he's the arch apostle of atheism in the world today. He is the main proponent of atheism, atheistic thinking in the world today. He does not believe in morality in the sense that morality can vary from person to person, from time to time, from place to place. So morality is not contingent upon a static agent. It is not coming from one entity. Rather, because God doesn't exist to him, that means there can be no morality. So how do they get the morality? And this is what Enlightenment European philosophers have left them with. And this was a point that was raised by European philosophers, even those who were atheists. People like even Voltaire, the French philosopher who was anti-religion. He stated in his writings that if God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him. It would be necessary to invent him. Why? Because if you remove God from the picture, then what follows is anarchy, chaos. Because God is the moral anchor. God is the one who gives you morality, moral values. He tells you what's right and wrong. If morality becomes a subjective issue, which depends on the human mind, then it becomes a subjective matter. Morality may vary from place to place, from time to time. So that's why Friedrich Nietzsche, a German philosopher, Iqbal was heavily impressed by him, not because of his atheism, but because of his thinking. He was a very intelligent man, no doubt. Friedrich Nietzsche was a German philosopher in the late 19th century. He died in the late 19th, 1890, I think he died. And he stated, God is dead. A'udhu billah. This is what he stated. God is dead and we have killed him. He was looking at the European civilization and he said, we have killed God and now we are cosmic orphans. We have been left without any moral guidance. So when you remove God from your life, what happens? You form your own morality. And then you have to rely on philosophies like consequentialism, which is an offshoot of philosophy called utilitarianism, which is what the European civilization again is based upon. Consequentialism. If actions have bad consequences, then they are forbidden. If they do not have bad consequences, then by nature, they can be allowed. And this is why recently Richard Dawkins tweeted that why don't we consider cannibalism? You know what cannibalism is?
Yes.
What is it?
Eating
human flesh. So they said, when humans die, why don't we eat their flesh? What's wrong with it morally? If God doesn't exist, what's wrong with it morally? There's nothing wrong with it. You can eat human flesh. It benefits, if it has benefits, if you can cook it, if you can spice it up, right? I'm going further than Richard Dawkins. If you don't believe me, you can go and check his Twitter account. He said this. And why is he saying this? He is a man who has written multiple books. Are you listening to me?
Yes.
This is what it leads to. This way of thinking eventually leads to crazy thoughts. If he is consistent with his philosophy, then there's nothing wrong with that. Lawrence Krauss is another very active atheistic activist who actually advised Obama on science. He had a debate with us in London. We had a debate in UCL, University College London. And in this debate, he was asked, and the clip is online. You can go and watch the clip. It is titled Hamza versus Lawrence Krauss. Has anyone seen this clip? One person, two people, right? In this clip, the person, Hamza, who was a Greek convert to Islam, who was debating him, asked him a question. That if we remove all the harmful elements, is incest morally wrong? You know what incest is? Incest. You know what it is, yeah? It is a relationship between a brother and a sister, or a son and a mother, right? A physical relationship. He was asked, is incest morally wrong? He said, if the harmful elements are removed, then there is nothing morally wrong with it. This is what it leads to. So if you remove God from your lives, then you may do what you want. There's nothing right, there is nothing wrong, it all becomes subjective. This is what we call argument for morality. This is what we call argument for morality. So this is what it leads to. That's why the Western civilization, today, there are people in Germany who are campaigning to legalize zoophilia. These are some extreme examples. Don't get me wrong. This is not the norm of the Western civilization. No, this is not. I'm saying there are people who have the audacity to argue like this within the framework, within the liberal, secular framework or atheistic framework of European or Western civilization. They are asking to legalize zoophilia. You know what zoophilia is? Do you know what zoophilia is? To legalize having sex with animals. They are asking the governments to legalize it and regulate it. Have places where people can actually go and do this. And apparently there were places in Denmark where this was already happening, where sheep were beautified. You know? Can you imagine this? I mean, this is not a joke. I'm not trying to be funny here. कि भेड़ के ऊपर makeup लगा दिया जाए, right? And a guy is coming and having a relationship with the sheep, right? Or even other animals for that matter. So if there is no limit to human desires, human perversity, if it's not controlled and regulated, then if God doesn't exist, you can do what you want. There's nothing wrong, there's nothing right. So this is what it eventually leads to. And this is exactly what's happening in the Western world. This is why Iqbal was talking about the Western world in the way he did. Right? तेरी निगाह में साबित नहीं खुदा का वजूद, मेरी निगाह में साबित नहीं वजूद तेरा. तेरी निगाह में साबित नहीं खुदा का वजूद, मेरी निगाह में साबित नहीं वजूद तेरा. If you deny God, then you deny yourselves. You deny yourselves. And there are many more arguments which philosophers have presented. The reason why today, and I'm going to make this my final point because I can talk about a lot more things, a lot more points I can raise, but I will stop here and take questions in case you want to raise some points in the Q&A. The final point I want to make is the reason why atheism has become fashion in the Muslim lands, in particular in Pakistan, for some youngsters, is for two reasons. Two reasons. Number one, the ignorance of the Islamic civilization. They have not read Muslim intellectuals. Because 6 centuries of Persian civilization was taken away from you, the Diwan of Hafiz, Gulistan Bostan of Sheikh Sadi, the poetry of Khusro, the poetry of Abdurrahman Jami, the poetry of Khaqani and Nizami and Firdausi was taken away from you in one strike, and then was imposed on you Western philosophy, Western literature, Western poetry, and it is but natural to fall a victim to it. This is why Iqbal said something like, "Khira na kar saka meri aankh ko jalwa-e farang." Right? Thank you. Jalwa-e danish-e farang. Meri aankh ka surma hai. Surma hai meri aankh ka. Thank you. So, This is what Iqbal said. Iqbal said, कि अफरंग का जलवा, तजल्ली अफरंग couldn't mesmerize me. मुझे उसने impress नहीं किया. हालांकि इकबाल ने जिंदगी यहाँ गुजारी थी, right? He lived here. क्योंकि मेरी आंख का सुरमा है खाके मदीना नजफ. मेरी आंख का सुरमा है मदीना की खाक. He had seen, Iqbal had seen the civilization of Islam because he studied it. He knew the Muslim intellectuals who had written before him. Iqbal wasn't just born instantaneously. Iqbal was made. He was made by the thinking, the philosophy, the theology, and the poetry of those who came before him. Iqbal was a huge fan of Hafiz Shirazi. He was a huge fan of people like Sheikh Sadi. He was a huge fan of Khusro and Rumi. Iqbal had seen these intellectuals, and when he read these giants, European thinkers, as much impressive as they were, people like Goethe. Iqbal was heavily influenced by the German poet Goethe. Why? Because Goethe himself was heavily impressed by Hafiz. Who knows Goethe? Goethe. Anyone? German philosopher and poet Goethe, who was a very prominent German thinker. And Goethe is the one who led the German Orientalism, and Germans became very close to Islam or Islamic civilization. They started to cherish it, even up to the Kaiser. Kaiser Wilhelm had actually sent a trophy to the tomb of Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi. He had placed it on his tomb in Damascus. Why would he do that? Why would he honor Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi? Kaiser, German Kaiser. And the trophy was later on removed by Lawrence of Arabia, which is another story in itself. So, Goethe was heavily impressed by people like Hafiz. You see, we haven't read these philosophers, these thinkers. I know, my friend, I know. Okay. Thank you for that. So, there were others who had been mesmerized. They had been taken. People like Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan traveled to the West, and he was mesmerized by the Western civilization, and he came back and he started to change Islam from within. He attempted. He was a very sincere man. I have a lot of respect for Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, but he was in error when it comes to being impressed by the Western civilization and trying to come back and mold Islam within the model of the West. Iqbal wasn't like that. Iqbal came back and he became a stronger Muslim. What did he say? Musalman ko Musalman kar diya, tufan maghrib ne. What does he mean by this? Musalman ko Musalman kar diya, tufan maghrib. And the tribute he paid to Tipu Sultan in this shape. So we can go on and on now. The point I'm making is that once you study your own civilization, this is reason number one why youngsters lean towards that way of thinking, because they are completely ignorant of their own civilization. They have not studied their own theologies, their philosophers, the thinkers. Second is excessive westernization. Because they see technology, they see advancement, they see organization, they see, media devices in their hands made in the West or made by the West. So they think that this is it. This is the way to success. No, it is not. Material success, material advancement doesn't always lead to spiritual strength. No, it does not. It doesn't always lead to moral success. And I can give many examples in this regard. I'll stop my lecture here for today because my time is running out. So I will take Q&A. Thank you so much for listening. You are welcome to ask questions. You have 5 to 10 minutes to ask questions. You're more than welcome. Please bear in mind that there are many ideas I couldn't express and I couldn't expand on. If you think I have left something out, feel free to ask. And many students or many kids or many children or many youngsters, they have questions and they think if I ask the question I'll be judged. Don't think that, because you won't be judged here. You will be helped or you will be responded to in this sitting. No one will judge you. Okay, I know what the problems are. I know how people can think and how people can end up thinking in a certain way. So there's no judgment here. You can ask any question you like. Yes, anyone. Who's
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Yes.
So thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for delivering this lecture. My question is that you mentioned that we have an bad version, the Western world. Okay. So when we look back at our own civilization, we are basically divided in sects. What we look up to are Maulvis and ulamas, who are practically, we would say, divided in something.
Right.
So my point is that, don't you think that we as young people don't have a place to look up to, some people to look up to, or
Yes.
actually learn from someone?
Okay.
Because when we go, there's a right and a wrong. Whenever we battle atheism, we talk about there's a good and there's always a bad. So if there's something bad, good will take its place.
Okay.
That is what philosophy says.
Thank you for that question. Very important question, a very good question. My response to that question very quickly is that you have parents that disagree, right? Mom and dad. If you tell me your mom and dad have never had an argument, then you are from a different planet, right? Your mom and dad argue, they have different views. Mom says, "Maine pakka wala lagana," dad says, "No, maine AC wala lagana," right? Mom says, "Maine sofa wala rakhna," dad says, "No, wala rakho. Carpet dalo, sofa dalo." I see it every day in my house, right? Okay? Does that mean we start to say, there is no mom, there is no dad? Huh? Because they disagree, there is no mom, there is no dad. Disagreement is a human phenomenon, and it is to be cherished. It is to be cherished. But the way it is expressed is important. When it turns into hate, intolerance, violence, that's when it needs to be stopped. Okay? Sectarianism does not necessarily always lead to doubts in Islam and God. Okay? We have an Islamic civilization. Is there nothing good in Islamic civilization? Is there no poetry in Islamic civilization? No philosophy? No architecture? No art? No theology? Nothing pleasant? Is it all Maulana Fazlur Rahman? Right? Sorry, I mean, he's a famous figure, so that's why I mentioned his name, right? A lot of people give his example. वो उस बेचारे को यहाँ पाकिस्तान में वो स्केपगोट बनाया हुआ है कि जब भी कोई इस्लाम के ऊपर तो बात आती है वो देखो मौलवी को देखो, राइट? वो देखो मौलवी का किरदार देखो, या एक और बहुत बड़े मौलवी साहब होते हैं टीवी पे बैठे हुए, जो स्क्रीन में बड़ी मुश्किल से पूरे आते हैं, उनका नाम मैं नहीं लेता, राइट? वो हमारे यंगस्टर कहते हैं ये है हमारे उलमा, नहीं ये नहीं है भाई. This is not the best of our civilization. You know, this is something very important you have to understand. Jalaluddin Muhammad Akbar, who governed from 1556 to 1605, nearly 50 years. His period was the peak of the Mughal Empire. He is the one who carved the empire for his followers. Jahangir was an opium addict. He was a drunkard. And his son, Shah Jahan, had to undo a lot of things his father had done. And Aurangzeb had to do the same. Akbar, did you know he apostatized from Islam? Did you know that? He invented his own religion called Deen Ilahi. In fact, some people claim that he claimed divinity. Subtly, indirectly, he started to claim that he was God or he was divine. How? What caused it? A complete different lecture on history. Inshallah, on another day, we can do that as well. But what caused it? Because Akbar was uneducated. Akbar didn't know how to read and write. Akbar was, because he was 13 years old when the government fell on him. His father fell from the library stairs and he died. Humayun died in an accident. And Akbar was 13 years old and he had no time to study books. So what happened was he created a place called Ibadat Khana where Muslim scholars were brought and they would argue with each other. Akbar had made the assumption that his scholars, the scholars of his time, are the best scholars in the world. This is where he went wrong. And Mullah Abdul Qadir Badayuni, who was an eyewitness to these events taking place, he wrote in his history, Muntakhab al-Tawarikh, that Akbar had assumed that all of these scholars who are arguing in front of him and are behaving like kids, like children, behaving immorally, and they were corrupt, they were stealing money, and all those things were happening. He thought, agar ye Islam ki sabse behtareen misal hai, then Islam cannot be true. That caused him to apostatize from Islam because he saw, और इसी किस्म का एक प्रोग्राम हमारे टीवी चैनल में लगा था, रमजान के महीने में आता है, बड़े जोरों शोर से प्रोग्राम लगता है, जहां पर 4-5 स्कॉलर्स बैठे होते हैं, एक देवबंदी फिरके से और एक बरेलवी फिरके से और एक अहले हदीस होते हैं, और बीच में एक माशाल्लाह हमारे बड़े अजीज भाई हैं, आई थिंक यू नो द वन आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट, मिर्जा गालिब की मूवी वाले, राइट? वो बीच में बैठे होते हैं और वो उलमा को लड़ा रहे होते हैं. इसका मकसद क्या है? इसका मकसद ये है कि जो देखें, जो कमजोर जहन के लोग होते हैं, जिनके पास इस्लाम का ज्यादा इल्म नहीं, इस्लामिक सिविलाइजेशन को नहीं जानते, इस्लामिक तहजीब के बारे में नहीं जानते, जो बड़ी बड़ी हमारी शख्सियात है, शाह वलीउल्लाह जैसी, शाह वलीउल्लाह मुहद्दिस देहलवी भी इस्लाम की रिप्रेजेंटेटिव थे ना, वो इस्लाम की स्कॉलर थे. उनकी किताबें पढ़े आप दंग रह जाएंगे, यू विल बी ब्लोन अवे कंप्लीटली. इमाम गजाली को पढ़े आप, इब्न तैमिया को पढ़े आप हैरान रह जाएंगे कि कैसे लोग थे, जीनियसेस. इब्न हजम स्पेन में जो थे, या क्या नाम था उनका, इब्न रुश्द जो स्पेन में, फिलोसोफर / थियोलॉजियन, giants. Because we don't know these people, we assume that what we today have is the best. Unfortunately, that's not true. What we today have, if anything, is the worst example. And you cannot judge Islam by these examples, because these examples are not good examples. So please, if you want to judge Islam, judge it by its own merit. Can I announce this? Okay. So I think I will return for Q&A. Q&A session.
I have a question.
I'm coming back for Q&A. I'm coming back for Q&A. So thank you so much for listening. And there's another guest coming to have some remarks. Thank you so much. I'll see you in a few minutes. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your precious time. I would like to call our Vice Chancellor of your university,